Good evening, everyone. This is welcome to Delta Entertainment. I am your host, Lego Kenobi, and today we got two articles that we're going to discuss that will be separate. And our first topic of the day is going to be Nosferatu writer director Robert Eggers, Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Holt, and the cast review of their vampire dream. So, the Nosferatu trailer, Nosferatu, is getting ready to hit release on the 25th of December, which is Christmas Day. And so far, there has been reports that people watched the movie early and they said that the movie is a big hit, bro. It is a big success. And lots of promises, lots of good promises in this movie. So let's take a read at this article that I have in Deadline and see what we got. There's a moment early in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu when Lily Rose Depp, last seen as the twisty pop star in The Idol, telegraphs to the audience, this will be unlike anything you've ever seen before. In Eggers' reimagining of F.W. Murnau's 1922 German expressionist horror fantasy, Nosferatu, a symphony of horror, Depp is magnetic vampire muse Ellen Hunter, paired with Nicholas Holt as her husband Thomas. As we witness Elaine's loneliness and desire being sated by a monster, followed by an opening monologue in which she confesses her fears to her husband, it's clear that Eggers' casting choice has paid off. At audition, Depp performed the same monologue and Eggers gave her the role that same day. Myself, the casting director, and even the videographer were in tears because it was so powerful. Eggers says she was as she is in the film, incredibly brave and raw and powerful. Her ability to tune into this dark and haunted place so quickly is pretty phenomenal. In the original Nosferatu, a young German realtor is sent to Transylvania to secure a property in his local area for the mysterious Count Orlok, who arrives by boat and proceeds to stalk the main man's fiancée. If you think that sounds a lot like the plot of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, published in 1897, so did the deceased author's estate, who sued the film's producers and ordered every print to be destroyed. However, some grainy bootleg copies survived, and in 1981, serious repair work began in a bid to restore Murnau's vision. Edgar has loved the story of Nosferatu almost all his life. He was just 9 years old when he happened upon one of those grainy bootleg Murnau's film, and he became especially captivated by actor Max Schreck's portrayal of the vampire. In Stoker's novel Count Dracula is something described as a tall old man, clean shaven, save for a long white mustache and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. In Murnau's Nosferatu, however, Shrek appears as a walking nightmare, a terrifying skeletal creature with two sharp pointed teeth, bat-like ears, and claws for hands. Max Schreck's performance, the makeup that he designed, his uncanny movements, Eggers recalls of seeing it that first time. The VHS was made from a degraded 16mm print, so you don't see the bald cap and the grease paint, and sometimes his irises look like cat eyes. It doesn't look like that in the stored version, but in what I saw, it had kind of more realism because of the degraded quality that I was watching. The years before age 8, Eggers had dressed as Count Dracula for Halloween. His fascination with vampire lore then just beginning. Later in high school, inspired by Henrik Gallen's Nosferatu screenplay. Oh, what the? Yeah, that was just a glitch there, baby. And Stoker's novel Dracula, Eggers would team up with classmate Ashley Kelly Tata, now an accomplished theater director, to put on a stage production of Nosferatu in which Eggers starred as the vampire Count Orlok. Edouard Langlois, the artistic director of the Edwin Booth Theater in Dover, New Hampshire, saw the production and invited Eggers and Kelly Tata to bring it to his space. Thus, that play who would show Eggers what he wanted to do, and it became the reason he is director today. And ever since he has dreamed of bringing Nosferatu to the screen. The project almost came together a few times, only to have it fall apart for various reasons. It's a complicated, Eggers says, citing one factor was originally that the timing crossed over with when he was still in post with his previous film. Jeez, I think that's going to keep happening a lot. The Northman, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown had it all gone at the time. He says, but basically I think after it fell apart the whole second time, I was like, this is happening. It's never going to happen. It's done. Forget about it. Morano's ghost is telling me to blank off. Leave it alone. And I had a script that I was really passionate about, but no one wanted to make it. But then I went to Cujo at Focus and said Nosferatu, and he was like, yeah, sounds great. And then all of a sudden, everything snowballed. Eggers approached Holt for the role of Thomas, pure and heartfelt man gripped by the need to provide for his wife, because they had met years before, and as soon as he saw Eggers' first feature, The Witch, the actor had called him. Nicholas is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Eggers says, I remember when I met him in the first time. There it is, first time. It was in Brooklyn, and in this little bar that no longer exists, sadly, because it was pretty cool. He was just so gentle. Eggers thought of Holt for his, particularly in view of his work in Yorgos Lanthimos' 2018 from the film The Favorite. I think after working with Yorgos, and I think particularly his attention to detail of every single beat and micro beat in the dialogue and the scene work, I felt like this is a kind of perfect match, Eggers says. He has both his incredible naturalistic emotional thing, and then he can handle the period language and really communicate it effortlessly, and he has a great look for it and a great feel for it. For anyone who has seen Eggers' three films, The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, it is understood that he has a singular and transportive vision. As Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays Frederick Harding, the vampire skeptic husband of Elaine's best friend Anna, puts it, Robert Eggers' movie is so distinctively Robert Eggers, and as such, in Nosferatu, Eggers plunges us into his vision, to another dimension, an elegant yet terrifying world in which a monster stalks the dark of the unconscious as both the evil within and the outward manifestation of some ancient lore. Like Holt, Willem Dafoe had also met Eggers right after The Witch, and like Holt, he had called the director and asked to meet, which led to his role in Two-Hander, The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson, and then a role in The Northman 2. Off the latter, Dafoe says, I'm not 7 feet tall and 350 pounds, so I think I was very fortunate that he found something for me to do in that, and that was fun, and I'm a huge fan. In Nosferatu, Dafoe plays Professor Albin Alpenhart von Franz, a kindred spirit to Count Dracula's vampire-slaying nemesis Abraham Van Helsing. I know he had been talking about Nosferatu for a long time, says Dafoe, and I certainly wasn't going to play Orlok because, in fact, I did that before in Shadow of the Vampire, directed 2000 film about the making of the original Nosferatu, for which Dafoe was Oscar nominated. But I was very happy when he proposed his role of Von Vance, because clearly it was the role that was a guilty pleasure for him. And once upon a time he was an actor, and I felt strongly that this is the role he would play if he weren't directing. As an expert on the occult and mysticism, Von Franz is the only character who truly understands the strange psychic connection between Count Orlok and Depp's Elaine, which, though absent from the original Nosferatu, is a major plot point in Eggers' film, says Dafoe. I've heard of Robert describe it as a triangle between Ellen's husband, who's a loving guy, he loves her dearly, and he's sensuous. He wants to be a good husband, but he doesn't quite see her. He doesn't understand what she's going through. And then on the other hand, you have this demon lover that attacks her and she doesn't know why. But somewhere there is a deep understanding there and a deep attraction. The strange magnetism between Elaine and Count Olaf is as the heart of the film. Unlike her friend Anna, Elaine cannot or will not conceal her sexual desires. The vampire seems to hear some internal cry in her and targets her as a result, and this eagers explores themes of punishment and the shaming of female sexuality. Particularly in the 1980s, there was a lot of literary criticism talking about all these Victorian male authors who create these female heroines who have sexual desire and sexual energy, and then he needed to be killed and punished for that. Egger says it's this misogynist thing, but I think a lot of female literary critics who I was also reading were saying, but isn't it also interesting that from this repressed cultural period, there's the idea of this dark, chthonic female heroine who would be the person who would understand the depths. And in telling that same kind of story in the modern context, even trying to say through the lens of the 19th century, we could have potentially some more nuances there, potential, hopefully. Depp sees Elaine as a woman experiencing a real loneliness as well as a nascent sexuality. Well, as she says, this is something that I think is everybody experiences kind of around that time. Be it a girl or a boy or whoever. I think there's not as much room for girls, especially at the time. We're talking about a time period where there was a lot less room for women and girls to be much of anything except for exactly what people wanted them to be. So I think you feel that in Elaine, you would feel like the birth of all these new feelings, and she doesn't have anybody to talk about it or anybody to understand her. I think it's a real source of shame for her, and one that she's trying to come to terms with. And that's what I think is so beautiful about her relationship with Juan Franz. Willem's character, because he sees her in this way and understands her, I think, in a way that she longs to be understood. Holt adds, talking about the sexuality, there's also the interesting moment where Elaine says, Wills understand some sort of possession. You could never satisfy me like he could. There's this element, I think, with Thomas where because he is so good natured and pure in many ways, I think he hasn't ever let any darkness into his life or in his own passions. As Elaine becomes increasingly disturbed by Olaf's imminent arrival, that was required to embody the vampire's possession of her, arcing and contorting her body, her eyes rolling back in their sockets. In training for that body work, Eggers brought in Marie Gabrielle Rodi, a choreographer who specializes in Japanese Buto, named Ankoko Buto, which translates as Dance of the Art of Darkness. Buto was something like that I was familiar with. Eggers says, I had worked with Marie Gabrielle and choreographer Denise Fujiwara, I guess that's what it is, on The Witch. And so I had a basic understanding of it and knew that it would have many of the tools to do this stuff. So some things became more a demonic possession, but the starting place was with Marie Gabrielle Rodi. Man, there's a lot to read here, bro. Wow, dude. Alright. Yeah, this is a big article. See, that's it. Yeah, that's it. All right, let me get back here. I'll be right back because I gotta bring my dogs inside. So, give me 1 second. Let me just get back over here. This is what it was. Roddy. Okay, that's where I'm at. All right, give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. I won't go far. All right, guys. Sorry about that. All right, let me continue reading this article. It's a lot of reading, dude. It's good info. A lot of good info on this. Eggers also explored the work of 19th century French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot and his findings on the so-called hysteria. Charcot got an artist to do the engravings of his idea of every historical pose with his patients made for different reasons. And so we were able to use that as a roadmap of how we would orchestrate the dynamics of her character through all those different scenes. But of course, the vampire itself would be the crux of Eggers' vision. Evoking all his deep research into vampire lore, he went back to the tropes of other representations and peeled them back to build his own monster. His vampire would not drink from his victims' necks, nor would he appear like any other that came before on screen. Vampirism and Dracula is this thing that I've been thinking about and looking at for a long time. Edgar says, I had read Montagu Summers and a clergyman scholar who wrote about the occult as a teenager and many other authors of vampire lore, but I think until I set out to make Nosferatu, I was still too contaminated by the cinematic tropes. And so you're infusing things, you're reading with cinematic tropes that aren't there. In doing the research to write this script, I needed to be disciplined to forget what I knew. And then you start looking at the really early vampire accounts, and you're like, they're not even drinking blood. They're just strangling people or suffocating people or killing them to death. And that was really interesting. In terms of that actual look of Orlok, Eggers says he asked himself, what would a dead Transylvanian nobleman actually look like? That was basically where I started from. And I wanted to still acknowledge Max Schreck's makeup design. In one of the early attempts to get his film made, right after The Witch, Eggers had a 25-year-old Bill Skarsgård in mind for the Thomas Hutter character, but now he asked him to consider the role of Orlok. I've been dying to work with Robert for a very long time, but it was very daunting. Skarsgård says for part of this prep work, he spent countless hours consuming Romanian folklore podcasts and YouTube film videos. There's a whole giant sub-genre of a rabbit hole where you can just dive into with people reading ancient texts and the whole kind of mythology around it. And of course, Robert's intention with this one was to bring it back to its Transylvanian folklore version. This is very interesting. Very interesting that Robert Eggers has done with this movie. Eggers says, first was finding the voice, and also I didn't want this spider hand thing resting on the chest. We were trying to flush that stuff away, but we found that in the audition process, then Eggers presented Skarsgård with the look of the monster, but Skarsgård was taken aback. Bill sees the sculpt of the bust and he freaks out, and he's like, that doesn't look anything like me. This guy didn't look like me when he was even alive. What the? I don't want to put a bad word. I said, what the hell? He wasn't mean, but he was alarmed, and I was like, well, that's the point. That you're totally transforming into somebody else. And then he's putting the makeup and he's like, oh, I look like a goblin. This is terrible. And then once they put the hair on, even though the makeup wasn't fully finished, I saw the first moment when he was like, okay, this is cool. This is a person. I started to see him in the mirror playing around, trying to do something. That was the next step of enjoying who the character was and could be. He continues, I think it was the second full makeup and costumes test. Bill entered, took his mark, and it was like, Orlok's there, he's there. The voice of the vampire was Holt and Depp's first impression of Skarsgård in character. Rob had a recording of Bill's voice. Holt says, and that was fascinating because even though through just a phone speaker in the rehearsal room, it was like it got through to your bones, and it was unexpected, but then made perfect sense. You're like, oh, of course, that's how he would sound if he was this nobleman who had been dead for 200 years. It was authority, but rounded is in history and truth, and so that was exciting. Wow, man. But that voice and Orlok's appearance were not easy to achieve. Sometimes the full makeup would take 6 hours, Skarsgård says. To create that voice, it was just a heavy labor performance. The prosthetics took forever. Everything was very uncomfortable. You were very hot and you were very itchy and sticky. And then for me to just being able to use that voice that we worked so hard on, there was a whole regimen every morning. Not only every morning, but between every take, between every scene, there was a whole routine that I built up in order to access the voice. Says Eggers, what's very interesting is not just the physical transformation, not just all the vocal work, what he did, but the darkness that he needed to actually inhabit. It sounds silly, but it was real. He told me the kind of things of he was thinking about, and it was frightening. And I'm glad he was able to go there. It wouldn't have worked otherwise. In fact, Skarsgård felt deeply haunted by the experience, so much so that even the film itself began to seem very dark to him. I became very obsessed. I was so in that mind state that I felt this is pure evil. I felt that the movie was evil. I think that felt like we were doing some sort of evil, dark magic sorcery at times. I certainly don't feel the way about the movie now that it's complete. I think it's actually beautiful. It's scary and it's horrific, but there's also a lot of beauty in it. And it's sensual and sexual, and it hits on so many different layers. But in terms of reaching out as far as humanly possible away from yourself and gathering whatever it is that you can gather and just transforming yourself, this is, I think, probably as far as I'll go in my entire career. Whoa. Let me see if you guys got that part. Okay. At camera test, Depp met Skarsgård in costume for the first time. I remember thinking, this is generally scary as hell to be just next to him in a room, so I can't imagine how it's going to read on screen. He was generally petrifying looking, and And then once we started actually shooting the movie, it was all otherworldly because, like everything in a Robert Eggers movie, the detail, the way they made his skin look and feel the costume, the whole thing feels so real. And it feels like a total nightmare. And that's what I think is so unsettling about it. It's not just like looking at a monster. It's like there's something very human about him, which I think makes it all the more terrifying. Before they were set to shoot, Eggers and his longtime DP Jaron Blaski moved to Prague. In the early films, I would shot list the whole thing. Eggers says, and he would shot list the whole thing, and then we would come together and do a kind of greatest hits. Lighthouse was a little more similar to this, where we were often coming up with shots together in the same room. He catches himself when I say early films. I'm also including some shorts, but this time I was so busy and consumed with a lot of blank shit, that Jaron was coming up with the stuff being like, do you like this? Yes or no? But really in a lovely fashion. So we moved to Prague early so that our kids could start school on time. And for a month and a half before prep started, pre-prep started, not even hard prep, Jaron and I were in my kitchen coming up with the shots. Wow, man. And this is a long article, man. I mean, I'm gonna tell you this. I'm gonna have to go to it right here, man. But this is very interesting, bro. Right now, this looks like it's talking about it talks about the movie, and so far, I don't want to be spoiled, but this does look pretty interesting, bro. This is gonna be an interesting movie, and I can't wait for this. I can't wait for this. So, that's gonna be it. I'll probably stop it there because I mean, it feels like it's gonna spoil the movie, man, and I don't want to be spoiled. But the way it looks, the way they talked about it, described it, it looks too damn good. I mean, this looks amazing, this movie. So, you guys let me know what you guys think, bro. I mean, look at that. I've been reading this for 26 minutes. Holy dang. All right, so you guys let me know what you think of this article, and what do you think of, are you guys excited for this movie? So, if you thank you for watching this channel. If you like the video, hit the like button, share this video, post a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts about Nosferatu. Are you excited about this movie? I mean, I can't wait for it, man. And if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button for me. All right, guys, you guys have a good night. Bye for now.